Fort Halifax, Winslow, Maine. Here we are at the site of the oldest wooden blockhouse and fortification in the United States. Built during the 7 Years' War in 1754 and the furthest north outpost of the Massachusetts colony in the war against France. Here you see the fortification behind me. This is the remaining part of it. Registered National Historic Landmark. All right, it's the oldest wooden blockhouse in the United States. It's been repaired, by the way. It had fallen into disrepair, and local historical groups rebuilt it over time. But Arnold arrived here September 26th, 1775. Now, in order to understand why Fort Halifax was built where it was, you have to understand geography, and in particular, New England's and Maine's geography. Maine is part of the Maritime Peninsula. That includes Nova Scotia, Quebec to the north of us, Massachusetts to the south, New Hampshire. Right? We're wrapped around by the St. Lawrence River in the north and the ocean on the south. Okay? Now, during the time period of the French and Indian War, the greatest fear that the English had in the Massachusetts colony, because remember, Maine was part of Massachusetts at this point, the greatest fear that they had was invasion via Quebec by a combination of French and Native American forces. The French and the Native Americans were very, very, very close allies. It's the confluence here in Winslow, Maine of two rivers, the Sebastiacook and the Kennebec. Now, the Sebastiacook means the almost through place. The Native Americans, who were canoe people at this point, the Abenakis, pretty much the rivers and the road were their roads of the time period. And I think that's important for us to understand that. They had highways and then they had connecting roads. All right. The highway, the north-south highway, was the Kennebec River system, all the way to Moosehead Lake. The east-west connector between the Kennebec, which is Maine's second largest river, and the Penobscot, which is Maine's largest river, was the Sebastiacook. And the Native American term Sebastiacook means the almost through place, where you could almost canoe through from the Kennebec to the Penobscot river system via portages and so forth. So that is the background, or the basic background, behind the reasoning, right, for the building of Fort Halifax. So on the evening of September 26th, Arnold's men landed here at Fort Halifax. The vanguard, the unit. Right? Now, by the time that he arrived, September 26, 1775, Fort Halifax had already fallen into disrepair. We have to remember that it was built in 1754 for the 7 Years' War. Now, the site behind me that you see, I'm going to kind of pan like this so you can see. Perfect location, flat spot, conjunction of the two rivers that were the primary Native American canoe routes. And on top of it, it was going to give the English a strategic advantage by occupying this point during the French and Indian War. That's why the fort was built. By the time Arnold arrives here, it's just a rotting hulk, all right? But it's going to be a campsite and a staging point for the portage at Ticonic Falls, which we're going to visit next. That background shot right there, that's the very first drop in the Kennebec River of any proportion. That's the start of it. It's Ticonic Falls here in Waterville. There was an entire series of drops. I'm going to try to worm my way up here past some slag and some heap and some boulders to kind of show you the original Ticonic Falls. They're in the process of rebuilding the bridge here in Waterville. So there's a lot, they've done a lot to kind of, unfortunately, to manipulate the river system here. But I'm going to kind of try to give you an upstream view of what it may have looked like. So here I am on this man-made berm that's really the result of all the old cement they've thrown off the bridge. But if you look upstream of me there, you can see the dam that's built over the original Ticonic Falls. This was the first major portage point for Arnold on his journey to Quebec. They had to take all the bateau out of the water, all the gear out of the bateau, carry it around the falls. get above the next set of falls, which is head of falls, go through 6 Mile Rapid on the way to their scouting. They would have started this right about September 27th. We know that they arrived at Halifax on the evening of the 26th. So September 27th and September 28th, 1775, Arnold's men would have been all over this point here, portaging their gear around Ticonic Falls in the first major drop. Now what you have to remember is as Arnold's men reached this point right here, they had already portaged around Ticonic Falls, which meant they had to take everything out of the bateau and then put it back into the bateau, carry it all, right? Well, it's the same thing here. They had to drag their boats up through all these rapids. So the key piece to remember is this was just the beginning part of the journey. So we're not very far from Augusta here in terms of distance, and the hardest part of Arnold's expedition still lay ahead of them.